This is Road Noise, episode number 7. In this episode, the topics are a smile makes all the difference. I've had to make another tough decision, so I'm going to talk about making tough decisions. Then I've realized this podcast actually has some listeners, some people who are downloading the episodes on a normal basis, and actually a few that have been binge listening. And I'm going to talk about that, and I want to find out what it is. I'm going to talk about how I want you to let me know what it is that you like about the podcast so I can continue to give you the content that you're looking for. So all that's coming up in this episode of Road Noise, Life 1 Mile at a Time. Welcome back to another episode of Road Noise. I'm your host, Michael Blackston, and you are riding along in the passenger seat with me on this trip on the way home from Cookeville, Tennessee. If you're wondering what that noise is rumbling in the background under my voice, well, that's the noise of the road, because we are on a road trip and we're having a conversation. Well, I'm talking to you. You're listening. So you're not going to get a word in edgewise, but I guess if you've tuned into this show, then that's okay. Maybe that's what you're looking for. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. I'm so glad to have you, and I hope this is something that you find useful, or at least I can keep you some company. So I talked about in the intro there that the 3 topics I want to hit on in this episode, and I'll get to those in just a minute. It's just, this is, as I record this, it's a Tuesday evening. It's actually 7:45 Eastern Time, p.m. Like I said, I'm on the way home from Cookeville, Tennessee, and normally I would have recorded this episode on the way to Cookeville early in the morning. But I didn't do that because I was listening to the raw audio of the recording of episode number 6. I just got behind. I wanted to release it Friday. I didn't get a chance to record it on Friday earlier like I wanted to, because I was so busy during the week on the coast of South Carolina. And so I recorded the episode on Saturday, so I was already a day late there, and I intended to release it on Sunday. Didn't get a chance to do that because by the time I got home Saturday night, there just was not enough time left in the evening, and I do have a family that I have duties to attend to for, and so I did that. And on Sunday, I was with the family all day then, and I just didn't get a chance to do anything that I wanted to do. Plus, I had to get up early on Monday morning to head to Cookeville, so that meant going to bed early on Sunday night. So I was doing the editing on Monday on the drive. Well, not editing on the drive. I was listening to the raw audio, and then Monday afternoon I did get an opportunity to whip out the edits that I needed and upload it to Libsyn, who is my podcast host provider. And here we are. I'm recording episode 7 on the way back now. It's just been a busy time of the year. Last year, this time, I was twiddling my thumbs and very, very scared. I was seriously considering killing the business. Normally, this time of the year, you have slow times. And it's okay because you put money back and you're able to eke out an existence during the slow time, ride out the storm. It usually starts getting busy again right before Christmas, and you can do pretty well and put enough back to get you through the slow time right after Christmas. But that didn't happen. The middle of September, the faucet of my business got completely shut off, and there was only a drip or two from the middle of September to the middle of February of 2015. But once the middle of February of 2015 hit, I have been just busy, and that is a good thing. And now that my wife has accepted a job offer for full-time work, she's going to be able to help out during those slow times. Because last year she wasn't working. She was a stay-at-home mom, so we didn't have her income either. Now we have her income to back us up if I have a slow time. But at this stage in the game, this time of the year, I haven't slowed down. I have been crazy, and the work that I've got pending is crazy as well. So it looks like all the way through Thanksgiving and up until very possibly up until Christmas Eve, I'll be working my fingers to the bone, and that's a good thing, and I praise the Lord for that, because it is truly a blessing. We had a lot of blessings in the last couple of weeks, and I've learned a lot of things. And the first one I want to talk about is the first topic for this episode of the podcast, and it's called "A Smile Makes All of the Difference." Now, I hope if you ask anybody who knows me personally, they'll tell you Mike is a nice guy. I hope they'll tell you that. I don't know what they would actually say, but that's just my hope and my prayers, that they'd say Mike is a nice guy. But I have noticed something, and my sister brought it to my attention. If you'll notice in the last episode, we talked about do-it-yourself nutcrackers. And during the time that my sister and I were making those nutcrackers, we had a lot of time to have conversations. And we talked about the way men treat women sort of in a public environment. Like if it's a pretty lady, let me back up and tell you. She was talking about, we were going through the bank, and she was trying to tell me and show me one of the tellers that works in her bank. And she apparently is a very pretty young lady. And my sister's son is single, and apparently they were kind of making eyes at each other. And my sister told him not to try to put on that macho kind of attitude that you tend to put on when a pretty girl is around. It's like he's a really great guy, and he's funny, and he's nice, and he's smiling all the time, but when it's time to kind of make nice with a pretty lady that maybe is a possible date, maybe there's an ask out coming up or something like that, he apparently does what a lot of men do and turns on the macho. And suddenly there's no more smile. It's all serious and cocked eyebrows and deep voices and trying to sound cool. And she told him not to do that. Well, I told her that although I don't do that, I do have my own little quirks when I notice another pretty lady. And now I'm married. I've been married for 20 years, and I'm happily married. But there's not a man out there, well, I take that back. There are a lot of men out there who would lie and tell you that it doesn't affect them when a young, pretty lady is smiling back at them. But I don't care who you are, how long you've been married. It's just built into our DNA. If a pretty young lady smiles at you and is nice, it makes you feel good. Well, when I'm out on my own, and I'm totally different when I'm with my wife because there's no fear there. I'm with my wife. I'm not worried about it. But when I'm on my own, I'm afraid of looking creepy. I'm afraid that the waitress, we'll just use a restaurant situation, because for the most part, that's when it happens for me. Every now and then it'll be in a bank or something when I'm cashing one of my customers' checks. But for the most part, when I go out on my trips, I go to the job, I go to the bank, I go to a restaurant, I go to my motel room, and that's it. So most of the time, if I'm going to be in the proximity of a pretty young lady, it's going to be either at the bank or the restaurant. I know most of the people at the bank, so we've narrowed it down to restaurant. So what I'm getting at is that when the waitress comes by, if I find her attractive, immediately I go into don't flirt with her, Michael, mode. You're out here by yourself. You're on your own. You have an addiction to pornography that you have to keep at bay, which I'm going to talk more in depth about that in a different podcast. I'm just not ready yet, but I have alluded to it in a couple of other ones. But you have to keep that at bay, and you need to seek righteousness as best you can. So what I end up doing without realizing it is I put up a wall. I guess I look like a grouch. I'm not trying to be Joe Cool. I'm just trying to be Joe Nothing. And so what happens is they'll talk to me and, hey, what would you like to drink? I'll have a sweet tea, thank you. I become all business. And it's a turnoff. And I can see it in their eyes. They can kind of tell, who is this jerk? And I don't mean to be that way. It's just a defense mechanism, because I realize I'm by myself, and I'm a happy guy. I always like to joke around and play, and it can come off as flirty. And I'm so scared that it's going to come off as flirty with my wife not there that I put up that all business wall. And what goes with that is no smile. And I realize that the way my face is made, my mouth is automatically drawn down at the corners. So I have this resting face that looks angry. People ask me all the time what's wrong when I'm perfectly happy, just because my resting face, I look mad. Well, after my sister and I had this conversation, I realized, and I told her, I do that too, and I don't realize it. And I need to stop that. Just because I'm smiling at someone does not mean I'm flirting with them. Just because I'm laughing with them and using a bright tone to my voice does not mean I'm flirting with them. If I start saying, hey, cutie pie, or I don't even know how to flirt. I would be, honestly, if I were to give flirting an honest effort, it would be the funniest thing you've ever seen in your life. Because I've been married for 20 years, I don't have to flirt. So I really don't know how. So I decided, you know what? There's going to be no more of this Mr. Business Guy, Michael. When you are out, you need to exude the joy. I'm a Christian. I find the joy of the Lord is my strength. I love my Savior, and I should always be joyful. And I decided I'm going to be that way. And now I'm not saying that every time I talk to anybody when I'm out on a trip that I'm all business and all yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. It's not like that. I'm pretty much a nice guy. It's just if it happens to be a young pretty girl, I throw up that wall. Well, I had the opportunity in this trip to give that a test. There were a couple of times that I was at restaurants and the girl behind the counter or the waitress helping me out at the restaurant was kind of cute and perky and doing what waitresses are supposed to do to earn their tips. Being nice, being smiley, being chipper, being ultra servant. That's what their job is. So I said, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to take note of the difference in the demeanor of these young ladies when I actually smile back and use a bright tone to my voice and show them joy. Not trying to be flirty, just being me and being happy. It is amazing the difference, and not just the service, but just the overall experience I had with these people. It's amazing the difference when you decide to smile, when you decide to be happy and joyful. And I talked about this on episode, I think it was number 5, the Don't Be an Anal Crevice. I talked about how people have just gotten into a culture of being jerks. And I realized that I was one of the problems. So I don't do that anymore. And I used my smile and I brightened up my tone of voice and I was just nice to them. It was as simple as that. But they smiled back. They were so much more easy with me. I noticed when I put up that wall, they immediately put up a wall themselves. They realized, okay, here's a jerk. Let's just get through the service and get somebody else at this table. And I don't say anything negative to them. It's just when you don't put on a happy air, it creates this aura around the whole area of you that tells everybody around you, just deal with them as best you can and get through it. And I didn't want that anymore. I did not want to be the one being a jerk. So I didn't, and it worked tremendously. So I want to encourage you, dear listener, to do the same thing. Take a reality check. Take a look at yourself. Find out whether or not you are putting on some sort of airs or aura of negativity when you're around other people. And it doesn't have to be at a restaurant. It can be the cashier at the grocery store. It can be anybody you come into contact with. If they're not your BFF, if it's not somebody you're very familiar with that you've already broken down walls, a lot of times when we meet strangers or people we're not comfortable with, we automatically throw up those walls and we throw up Mr. Business, and it hurts our opportunity to create a relationship with those people. So if you realize that you're having that sort of an attitude, see about giving them a smile. See about changing it. Be proactive, and I promise you it's going to do a world of good for your experience in daily life. And a smile makes all the difference in the world. I also wanted to talk about making tough decisions, because in the last episode I talked about a couple of tough decisions I've made recently. And since that recording, I've made another tough decision, and this is really tough for me as an artist. Several episodes back, I spoke about how there's going to come a time where I can't etch anymore, where my hand is going to say, no more, Michael. You just can't do it. And that's not here yet, but it will come. And the older I get, the more I can feel physically my hand saying, you know, you need a little more rest. You need to slow it down, Michael. So I've really been on an adventure to try to figure out what I can put into place and have ready for the day I have to retire from etching, because right now that's what I do. That's how I make my money. And if I had to quit tomorrow, I would not have an income. I don't want that to happen. I like to plan ahead. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what I want to do for when that day comes and go ahead and start building up for it. I would also like to eventually not have to travel as much. And you may say, well, Michael, what'll happen to road noise life 1 mile at a time if you stopped traveling? Well, if that's the case and I've got enough people that enjoy the show and I still want to do it, I can always jump in my car to have that road noise behind me and take a little road trip and still record the podcast. So I'm not really worried about that. But I would like to be able to be home with my family more. That's going to require a little bit of a change, a lot of change in what I do. And so I'm trying to figure out what some of those things are. I've said that about 20 times now. Let me get to the point. I'm a writer, but not only am I a writer, the subcategories of the writing, I write a blog, I have a novel I'm in the middle of, I'm composing the music to a musical, and I am trying to finish up the final draft of a comedy for the stage. I'm a playwright. That's just all the subcategory of writing. As a visual artist, I like to do some photography, although that's not very high on my list and I really could give it or take it, so it's not really what I'm passionate about. But my job is in the visual arts as a granite etcher, but I also like to paint. I like to draw in pencil. All of the mediums there, I dabble in a little bit here and a little bit there. And there's so many projects that I would like to get to, and I've tried to prioritize so that I complete one at a time and then go to the next one. But it has kind of dawned on me that one of the ways that I think that I'm going to build my business, part of it is the branding of myself that I spoke of in the last episode, doing these podcasts, doing my blog, and things like that. There are some affiliate marketing strategies that I'm trying to implement. I am an Amazon affiliate, and I would really like to start tackling that seriously to try to make a little bit of an income. You're not going to make more than likely a really serious income with that unless you work on it more than I really have time to, but I would like to put more into it so that I can have a little bit of extra income. I'd like to eventually monetize the blog. There's all sorts of things that I'm doing in the branding space of Michael Blackston, and some of these things that I'm trying to do that I have on my list, I've had to make the tough decision to drop to the bottom of my list. And I have a reason for it, and I made this decision while I was etching yesterday. And it kind of was like a gut punch. And as I drive, I hope I have not missed my turn. I don't think I have. No, I haven't. The gut check is that I need to put everything aside that is not part of the branding process until I have gotten a foothold on the branding, and I need to really focus on that. some of these things, and that does not include my business. My business has to keep going, obviously. That's what puts food on the table. But my book, my plays, to some degree my painting, I really kind of need to put it aside and spend that energy on the branding, making sure that I have blog posts ready to go and they're consistent. And not only that, but it's great if you have a blog and you share it on Facebook and share it on Twitter every time you release it, but you're not going to go anywhere like that. To have a successful blog, you need to be submitting it to blog spaces, to other avenues than just social media. It really is a lot of time and effort that goes into making something like that successful, and if I don't put it into it, it's just going to be another hobby. And although I do enjoy it, I'm trying to get home, and I'm trying to create something that I can vault into something that can be a moneymaker for me, not if, but when my hand decides it can no longer etch. I don't think it'll ever get to the point where I can't use my hand anymore. I don't think that's something I have to worry too much about. It's always a possibility, but so I'll be able to paint and things like that. But when you etch, and especially when you etch the way I etch, I'm on a time frame. I have to do a 4-foot stone with a complete work of art, 4 feet wide, in a day or two. That means as soon as I get there, my hand starts working. It might stop for lunch. Other than that, my hand is moving all day long. That's just a physicality that is not going to last forever. So I've decided to put stuff that's been on my priority list and I've been excited about. One of the biggies being my musical that I'm in the middle of composing. Well, I'm not even in the middle of it. I'm just at the beginning of it. I've got the music composed, but I don't have the arrangement done. I got to put that aside. Now, the stage play, the comedy I was telling you about for the stage, I'm going to finish that because it is almost complete. It is almost ready to put on a stage. And so I'm not going to stop right where I am with that. But I'm 250 pages into a novel that I'd really like to get back with. I'm going to put that to the side. I'm going to drawer that, shelve it. I'm not throwing it away. I can come back to it, but I am deciding to put almost all of my extra effort into the Michael Blackston brand. Now, I am going to reach out to you and ask you to help me with that. Not monetarily. Eventually, if I get enough people that are constantly and consistently downloading this podcast and listening and especially communicating with me, that's something I have not had yet, and I'm going to urge you to do that in just a little bit. We'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. Eventually, I will probably assign a Patreon account to this podcast so you can help support it. Patreon accounts are not something that I would expect to make a living with, but I do pay about $20 to $25 a month just for the right to have Libsyn host this podcast. And it's not all Libsyn, it's other stuff too, but the total for getting this podcast out consistently and having enough data storage to do a weekly hour-long podcast requires about $25 a month from me, maybe $30 actually. And so there may eventually become a Patreon account to see if maybe you can help me out just with the hosting, but that would always be voluntary. This podcast will always be free. And right now it's so brand new and there are so few listeners that download it on a consistent basis that it wouldn't make any sense to do that. So the way you can help me brand me is to share this podcast, to share it on your Facebook status, to tell your friends about it. And I'm not going to go a whole lot into that right now because I'll do that at the end of the podcast. I don't want to start in the middle of this episode begging you for shares and ratings and reviews and all that stuff. I'll do that at the end of the podcast. Just make sure, if you like what you're listening to, listen through the end once I start the outro to find out how you can get in touch with me and how you can help me share the Road Noise podcast. And so that was a hard decision I had to make. As an artist, if you're not an artist, you probably don't understand how we artists view our creations. A painting is not just sticky color on a canvas. A drawing is not just strokes on a piece of paper. A story is not just letters on a page. They're our babies. They're things that we've created. They are from our heart, from our mind, from our soul. And they almost take a life of their own. And to take away their life or their breath for a while, or to cover them up, to shelve a story, to not paint, that's hard to do. It's like killing your babies. And that's why it was so tough for me to say, I'm not going to do that for a while. Once Friends Like You, which is the working title of the comedy, once that's done, it's just going to be the blog and these podcasts and constantly marketing and sharing and trying to reach an audience until I can reach enough people that it starts becoming self-sustaining. And as that happens, then I'll have a little more time to add to do some of these other hobbies. But it's a hard decision to make for me, and I made it, and I'm going to be okay with it. Whereas it is painful, there is a little bit of freedom that goes along with it, because I'm allowing myself to say it's okay not to. It's okay not to write on my novel. It's okay to let Thomas Paler, the lead hero, the lead guy in my story, to let him sit there wondering if his wife's going to die because she's being operated on at the moment. He's just going to have to sit there and wait a while, and I'm okay with that. The musical has been going on for well over 20 years, and that may be the hardest one of all, because the first play that I ever did, Mr. Long Said Nothing, was another one that I had in mind for almost 20 years, and I finally got it out of my head and onto the page, and then from the page to the stage, and that has to rank in the top 5 moments of my life, getting to direct a full cast and crew of actors and stagehands in a production of my own work. That was amazing. And I'm going to have an entire episode dedicated to my experience just finally gutting out my emotions of getting Mr. Long Said Nothing from my mind to the page and from the page to the stage. And we'll talk about that in another episode, because that's going to take up the whole episode. I have an idea when I do that one. But The Right Song is the musical, and it's been in development for longer than Mr. Long Said Nothing has. And I have the entire script written, but there are a lot of changes that have to be made after I've learned a lot. I've grown over 20 years. I've improved in my writing and in my storytelling over 20 years of experience, and now I see a lot of things that need to be tweaked and worked out in The Right Song. And I have been waiting until Friends Like You was complete, and the next step was to start The Right Song. Well, I pushed that down, and it could be another 20 years before that show was ready for a stage, and I guess I'm going to have to be okay with that. Now, that is something that I can do a little at a time as far as the music goes, because I'm not an arranger. So if I have to, I can chord chart it out, and we could actually stage it with a bare bones group, rock band kind of situation with just a 5-piece orchestra or something like that with chord charts. I could do that if I had to, and I may end up doing it that way. But what I've decided, especially with the blog, is I need to stay 3 blogs ahead. I need to always have, in my computer, I have waiting to be released and already released or has been released or something like that. 2 separate files. So when I type out a blog article, I put it in the waiting to be released, and once I release it, I move it over to the has been released file. I need to keep at least 3 ready to go in the waiting to be released file. Now, if I have that and I feel like writing on my play and tweaking it a little bit, I've got that file on my computer, and I can do that a little at a time. But as far as taking my See, the idea when I finished Friends Like You, the comedy, the idea was to start taking my little lightweight Yamaha keyboard with me. There's not much to it, but it is okay to plug into a mixer and do some basic chording and music writing. And the idea was to take it with me on my trips and do that at night. And I just don't know that I'm going to be able to do that and have this blog be as serious as I want it to be. And I'm really excited about this blog. So I'm branding Michael Blackston. I'm putting my babies on a shelf, and it's hard. It's a tough decision to make. I wonder if you've got some tough decisions that if you started looking back at the things that are going on in your life, if there's some things you need to shelf for some things that should take higher priority in your life. Another thing that I'm needing to do is I have noticed that once again, I have put my Bible on my shelf, and I haven't been paying attention to God's Word as much as I need to, and that is showing in the difficulty. Just really briefly talking about the addiction to pornography, which I have struggled with for over 20 years, and I seem to have a handle on now. It is a noticeable difference when I am staying in prayer and staying in the reading of God's Word. I don't have a problem. But when I have shelved my Bible and I'm not praying as much as I need to, when God becomes an afterthought and my walk with Him becomes an afterthought, I start seeing that it's easier to go further in the temptation. Now, I've been okay. I've been doing okay, but it's not been as easy. And so here, speaking to a Christian, if you're listening to this and you're not a Christian, that's fine. But I'm speaking from a Christian point of view, and I'm speaking to other Christians just at this moment. If you are a Christian and you're struggling with that type of thing, that's your number one weapon. And you need... I'm pausing here because I'm trying to get over here so I can get into... I'm getting ready to get on Spaghetti Junction. I'm on 285 in Atlanta, getting ready to get on 85 North and get on Spaghetti Junction. Need to get over in the correct lane here. But if you're a Christian who is struggling with pornography, your number one tool is your walk with Christ. Your prayers, you got to stay in prayer, and you got to stay in the Word. And I've noticed that I need to make that a priority again, and it has not been a priority in the last few weeks. And so I'm making that a priority as well. In fact, one of the ways I'm getting back into reading my Word is to get back into biblical apologetics. I love the study of Bible apologetics, and back when I was really into that, I was constantly digging through the Bible. And so I'm going to get back into that a little bit as far as my study time goes. So prioritize. If you've got some things, if your life feels like it's just in a shambles, or it feels like you're in a whirlwind and you can't catch your breath because there's just too much going on and you can't seem to fit everything in your day, it's okay to put some stuff on the shelf. And maybe you need to take a look at everything that's going on around you and make a list and say, you know what, this is great, I enjoy this, but this is what's important. This, by getting this complete, will open up opportunities for me to do the other stuff. Because that's my thought with the branding. If I can get it the way I want it, then there may come a time, I'm looking to hopefully do some public speaking. I would love to make public speaking a career. But it's not easy to get into, and it takes time. So I'd love to make the effort, do the work to get to that point. And then once I'm at that point, I will have some time to add those hobbies back in as I create the time and as the time comes around to me. So just a thought for you. You might want to take a look at what's going on around you and prioritize and say, you know what, I'm going to put my efforts, my focus in this area. This other stuff can wait. And then just do that one thing at a time. And I think you'll see that your stress level will subside at least some. The weight on your shoulders will lighten. And finally, I alluded to this earlier, but I noticed that I have listeners to this podcast. If it seems like I'm a bit surprised by that, it's because I am. I knew there would be a couple of people who might listen to it every now and then, but it really has surprised me the number or the amount of growth I get every time I release an episode. And it's not hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, it's not. But what I've noticed is every time I release a new episode, I seem to get the ones that downloaded it before, plus a few more. And then I also notice, especially the last episode number 6 that I released Monday, I really noticed that not only was I getting new downloads, but I was also getting new downloads from past episodes, which meant people were binge listening. People were listening to the current episode and saying, I like that. I want to hear more. I want to ride along on another road trip with Michael. Let's see what this next episode's about. And I started seeing the previous episodes, 1 through 5, getting more plays. And so that's neat. That's neat to watch. When you podcast, one of the things they tell you is do not watch your downloads. Don't look at your stats. If you've just got one listener who really enjoys your show, then it's worth it if you're doing it for the right reason. I feel like I'm doing it for the right reason. I love doing this. I love podcasting. And I love talking on a microphone. And I love talking to other people. And I love thinking that the stories I tell and the things about my life are interesting to other people and might just have some value. I hope that's true for you. And I hope that if you are listening to this, that you will go back and listen to the other episodes if you haven't so far. And now's when I want to talk about how you can help me with that. The first thing I want to do is, if you're one of those people who are enjoying this podcast on a consistent basis, if you're downloading this podcast or streaming it and listening to the entire thing and then listening to more, and you enjoy it and you say, I like this guy, I'd like to be a part of Michael's life, I want to get to know him, it's not hard to do. I've got several ways to get in touch with me, and I really would like to hear from you. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be drawn out. I'm not asking you to be, somebody that I call at 3 o'clock in the morning if I'm feeling sad. No, I'm not asking that. What I want to know from you is what you like about the show. I want to know what it is that I'm doing that is drawing you to it, because that's what I need to do. As you have a new show, you test out new things, you try out new things, and you see what works here, and maybe this didn't really seem to work. I'll try this, and then maybe that didn't seem to work. I'll try this. Well, that really works. I'll keep doing that. I need to know what it is that you're liking, and I need to know it from everybody that listens if you get the opportunity. The best way to do it is to contact me through my email or the hotline, and I'm going to give you those numbers in just a little bit. Now, that's contacting me. But it would really help, too, if you know somebody who is a podcast junkie or somebody who just likes listening to other people's lives. If you know somebody who watches a lot of reality TV and they really get into the lives of the characters on TV, then this might be the type of thing that they would like. Shoot them an email and say, hey, look, I was thinking of you. I know you like this type of stuff. I like this show. Here's the link to Road Noise, Life 1 Mile at a Time with Michael Blackston. I think you'd like it. Or even just tell them when you see them. Just share the information. Word of mouth is the best way. And the reason that word of mouth is the best way to get other people to listen is because they already trust you. I can tell people all day long on the internet to come listen to my show. There's all sorts of things I can do. I can post on social media. I can tweet. I can put it on LinkedIn, Facebook. But if you don't know me, really, you really have no incentive to listen unless the topic happens to catch your attention. Same thing with my blog. So word of mouth is paramount, because if you're telling a friend about it, they know you. They like you. They trust you. If you say it's good, then maybe it's worth a listen. And they may not do it every time, but they're going to do it a whole lot more often than if they hear it coming from me, a stranger that they have no idea who I am. To them, it's just going to be more content in their face. So would you help me that way? I'm going to ask you to go to iTunes. If you're listening on iTunes, I'm going to ask you to go to my to the Road Noise page on iTunes and share it and give me a review. It really helps me on iTunes. The better I do on iTunes, the better I'm going to do all the way around, because iTunes is the number one place that podcatchers get their feeds from, and it's just really the number one place for you to give me a review. Please go to iTunes and share and rate and review the podcast, because the more iTunes sees good ratings and reviews, the more they're going to be likely to put me up on New and Noteworthy or any of that type of stuff. And whereas that's not as important as the content, I don't ask you to do that. I don't go deep into detail very often asking you to do that, but I am now. I'm taking this opportunity to tell you how important it is for that to happen. Hold on. I got caught in a situation here where I really need to get around this guy, and there's plenty of room in the lanes. I just happened to be surrounded by other slow people, and I couldn't get around the guy. Now, you did hear me mention that the more good ratings and reviews I get, the better it is for me. I want to make sure you understand I am a man of integrity. I do not want you to give me a good rating and review if you don't think the show is good. I want you to be honest. I would much rather have 5 bad ratings than 20 good ratings that are fake. That may sound odd to you, but I got to learn what you don't like. If you don't like something I'm doing, if you say, you know what, I'm listening to the show, I'm in with you, Michael, I'm all in, but I don't like the way you do this. I don't like this about the show. I need to know that as well, because that's going to help me grow as well. That's going to help me make the show better for you. So all of those things, it really comes down, as far as that type of thing, communicating with me. So, with that in mind, and with the end of the podcast really at hand now, let's go ahead and give you all of the ways that you can get in touch with me, and there are several of them. First, let's talk about social media. Social media, I have a Facebook page. It is facebook.com/roadnoisepodcast. Love for you to come and like the page and be a part of that community. I do have a arts page, or let's use correct grammar, Michael. I have an arts page called My Everything Arts. It's on Facebook as well. You just go to facebook.com/myeverythingarts. Now, that's a closed group. If you want to join that, I really ask that you be an artist of some sort. And if you are and you want to be a part of that group, all you got to do is ask to join. I am the sole administrator of that page. I'd love for you to send me a message when you try to join, or when you ask to join, and let me know that you heard about it from this podcast. But either way, ask to join, and so long as you're not a spam robot or somebody that's going to put a lot of material on there that would not be appropriate, because this is a family-oriented group. We have people of all ages, adults, teens, children, on this group. I don't allow any cursing or negative imagery or negative speech. We're all uplifting and encouraging on that group, but I would love for you to join if you're an artist, and you can get in touch with me that way as well. As far as emails and phone numbers and all that jazz, I've got a website. You can go to www.roadnoisepodcast.com. I have a contact page there where you can get in touch with me and go straight to the email. Or if you want to email me from whatever email source you want to come from, you would do that by going to roadnoisepodcast@gmail.com. That's roadnoisepodcast@gmail.com. Or call the hotline. The hotline number is 706-389-0401. That's 706-389-0401. And leave me a message there. Just make sure when you do. Now, that's a voicemail, and it's liable to get on the podcast if you do that, but I would love to hear from you, and leave it there. And just make sure that you reference the Road Noise Podcast because I have other podcasts that use that same hotline number too. So reference Road Noise Podcast if you call that number. Again, 706-389-0401. And that's the end of this show. This is episode number 7. I hope it's been informative. I hope by learning some of the things that I've learned about, you can enrich your life. Let me know how it enriched your life, or maybe how it took an hour of your time you'll never get back. I want to know all of those ways. But until next time, I'm Michael Blackston. Thank you for riding along in the passenger seat right beside me on Road Noise as we learn to live life 1 mile at a time.